There are more than 12 million scouts in the world today and 6 million Girl Guides. This great movement was founded by Lord Baden Powell of Gilwell. How did it all begin? In Baden Powell's own voice and words, and illustrated by his own sketches.
It started in 1908, but the microbe of scouting had got me long before that. When I was a boy at Charterhouse, I got a lot of fun out of trapping rabbits in woods that were out of bounds. In doing this, I learnt to creep silently, to note tracks and read their meaning, to use dry dead wood off trees and not off the ground for my fire.
And to avoid prowling masters,
I shinned up the nearest ivy-clad tree where I could nestle unobserved above the line of sight of the average searcher.
During the school holidays, he went sailing and tramping with his elder brothers, activities which further developed his instinctive talent for scouting. This early photo of him shows him as a member of the Charterhouse Cadet Corps. With no strong ideas about a career, except a vague desire to travel, he sat at the age of 19 for the Army entrance examination. In spite of only an average academic record, he was brilliantly successful. So much so that he was immediately commissioned as a sub-lieutenant in the 13th Hussars and sent to join the regiment in India at the end of 1876. In 1884, the regiment left India and on the way home landed in Natal in South Africa because trouble with the Boers was threatening. Baden Powell, now a captain, was sent by his CO to find an unguarded route across the Drakensberg Mountains. He grew a beard and set out, leading a second horse to carry his supplies. Posing as a newspaperman, he got the required information without arousing suspicion. This was the first of his many adventures as a scout. Returning to Natal in 1888, he took part in the campaign against Dinizulu. This is his sketch of the rocky stronghold to which the rebellious chief retired before surrendering. It was from Dinizulu that he acquired the necklace of wooden beads, two of which, worn around the neck on a leather thong, were later universally adopted as the wood badge, the sign of the trained scouter. BP had more adventures as a scout during his 2 years as intelligence officer in the Mediterranean. Once he posed as a butterfly hunter. And in this sketch, he ingeniously recorded the positions of the guns in a fort. The guns were shown as markings on the lines of the butterfly. These lines crossed the ones showing the shape of the fort and thus marked the positions of the guns. In 1895, Baden Powell, now a major, was sent to Ghana, then known as the Gold Coast, to command a levy of African pioneers and scouts. The levy took part in the successful campaign to stop the blood sacrifices performed by the Ashantis. BP captured the bowl used to collect the victim's blood. It was on the Ashanti expedition that he first saw the usefulness of the 6-foot staff, not only, as in this sketch, for laying the field telegraph in the bush, but also for sounding swamps and taking measurements. It was on this same expedition that he first wore the cowboy hat. The Africans called him Kantanki, he of the big hat. Both the staff and the hat later became part of the Scouts' equipment. The Matabele Rebellion in 1896 found Major Baden Powell on active service again for what he afterwards called the best adventure of my life. Here he is watching a skirmish with Herbert Plumer, who also helped in the early days of the Scouts and later became a field marshal. During this campaign, BP went alone on many scouting expeditions to find out the strength and disposition of the rebel forces. This is how he used to dress for such trips. Notice that, as well as the hat, he's now wearing the scarf, which later became part of the Scout uniform. He proved himself to be the outstanding scout of the British Army. One of his trophies from this campaign was the kudu horn, which was to play a part in the future. For his services in Matabeleland, Major Baden Powell, at the age of 40, was promoted colonel and then sent to Meerut in India to take command of the 5th Dragoon Guards. During this tour of duty,
I started teaching scouting to young soldiers in my regiment. the scheme worked. The men loved the training, and scouting became very popular in the regiment.
He introduced the then revolutionary idea of awarding a badge for proficiency. He called this sketch Badge Vanity. During a vacation in Kashmir in 1899,
I wrote a little book called Aids to Scouting for Soldiers. It taught them observation, or how to track, and it taught them deduction, or how to read the information given by the tracks.
but the proofs of the book were not corrected in India. They were posted from a small town in South Africa, Mafeking, where BP had been sent to take command of the garrison at the start of the Boer War in 1899.
Mafeking is a small market town on the railway. We had just 1,000 hastily trained troops and 300 townsmen armed as a town guard and about 600 white women and children.
The town was surrounded by 9,000 Boers.
We had to pretend to be very strong and dangerous force. The whole thing was a game of bluff. One bit of bluff was a megaphone we manufactured. In order to give the enemy no rest at night, through the megaphone, an officer would adjure his men to come on quietly. Sergeant Jones, take command of the left-hand lot. Have you all got your bayonets fixed? No firing, mind. Now come on, very quietly. And so on, till volleys of musketry told us that the enemy were thoroughly awake and so nervous that their reserves had to stand to. And all the time, our men were comfortably sleeping.
A night attack would probably have been successful.
To discourage this, we started searchlights. Again, a bluff. We only had one, made out of a biscuit tin with a strong acetylene lamp inside it. But that one lamp did yeoman duty. No sooner had it done a display in one fort than it was rushed off to a different one. And thus we spread an impression that any night attack would be exposed to a perfect blaze of searchlights everywhere.
It was at Mafeking that BP first became interested in training boys.
My chief staff officer, Lord Edward Cecil, got together the boys in the place and made them into a cadet corps for carrying orders and messages and acting as orderlies and so on in place of the soldiers who were thus released to go and strengthen the firing line. We then made the discovery that boys, when trusted and relied upon, were just as capable as men and just as reliable.
In 1900, BP was promoted Major General and given the task of raising and training the South African constabulary. This painting shows the uniform he designed for this force. In 1903, at the age of 46, he was made Inspector General of Cavalry, the highest command in his own branch of the army. Back in England, he found that his book, Aids to Scouting, was being used to train boys. Sir William Smith, the founder of the Boys' Brigade, asked him if he could rewrite Aids to Scouting so that it would appeal to boys instead of soldiers. BP was interested and decided, first of all, to try out an experiment. It was on Brownsea Island, off the Dorset coast, in 1907, that
I got together some 20 boys of all sorts, some from Eton and Harrow, some from the East End of London, some country lads, and some shop boys, and I mixed them up like plums in a pudding to live together in camp. I wanted to see how far the idea would interest the different kinds of lads, and we taught the boys camping, cooking, observation, deduction, woodcraft, chivalry, boatmanship, life-saving, health, patriotism, and all such things.
the camp lasted 12 days, and
The results upon those boys in that short space of time taught me the possibilities which the scout training held for boys. So I at once set to work and wrote the handbook, Scouting for Boys. The book came out in fortnightly parts at 4p a copy. Before many of the parts had been published, I began to get letters from boys who had taken up the game for themselves. Boys not belonging to the Boys' Brigade or other associations, And all through the following year, boys were writing to me, telling me how they had started their patrols and troops, and then had got men to come and act as their scoutmasters. Scouting just started itself.
In 1909, General Baden Powell was knighted for his military services. But so many boys were taking up scouting of their own accord that in 1910 he resigned from the army to devote all his time to this new movement. Soon he was inspecting rallies all over the country. This first movie picture of him was taken at Preston in 1911. Girls wanted the same kind of fun as their brothers, so the Girl Guides had been started in the previous year. Also in 1911, King George V reviewed 26,000 scouts at Windsor. Right from the start, the royal family realized the importance of this new movement, which had already spread to so many other countries. In 1912, Sir Robert Baden Powell set off on the first of his many world tours to see scouts and guides of all lands. On this tour, he met Miss Olive St. Clair Soames. They were married in the same year, 1912. This car was a wedding present from the Scouts, who paid for it by a penny subscription. Lady Baden Powell helped BP greatly with his ever-growing task. At the outbreak of the First World War, the Scouts did great service for their country. They helped with the harvest. They took over coast-watching duties, releasing coast guards for more active service, and performed many other useful tasks. The first important event after the war was the opening in 1919 of Gilwell Park as a permanent camping ground for boys and training centre for scouters. With BP as the Duke of Connaught, a lifelong friend who was president of the Boy Scouts for 30 years. At Olympia, London, in 1920, the first World Jamboree was held. It was attended by scouts from many parts of the Commonwealth and from 21 other countries as well. The overseas contingents were inspected by King George V outside Buckingham Palace. At this jamboree, BP was proclaimed Chief Scout of the World. The boys carried him shoulder high across the arena as wave after wave of cheering brought the jamboree to a close. Also at this jamboree were Heather and Peter, two of BP's children. In Denmark, 4 years later, the second World Jamboree was held, attended by scouts from 33 nations. BP was accompanied by the King of Denmark as he inspected the boys. The chief scout had already built up a reputation for bringing rain with him wherever he went, and this occasion was no exception. Year by year, the movement continued to grow, and BP gave himself little time for rest. He went to innumerable rallies, like this one in Cardiff in 1927, and attended conferences in many parts of the world. The following year, more than 50,000 scouts attended the coming-of-age jamboree at Birkenhead. With the chief scout was the Prince of Wales, now the Duke of Windsor, who stayed a night at the camp. At this rally, it was announced that King George V had raised BP to the peerage. Then the Prince spoke to the boys.
I heartily welcome the Boy Scouts who have travelled from their homes far distant in the British Empire and in many foreign lands for the coming of age of the Boy Scout movement. This is a unique assemblage representative of the youth of all the great nations of the world. And I ask them to remember that it is chiefly upon the coming generations that the future peace of the world depends. And may I have this opportunity of congratulating you, Chief Scout, on the honor that has been conferred on you by His Majesty.
He took the title of Lord Baden Powell of Gilwell. Now in his 73rd year, he attended the London rally in 1930.
You've come from long distances to meet me. I'm very grateful to you for it. I'm so grateful that I haven't turned on the rain as usual. I've kept it fine for you. But I thank you very much indeed for coming. Best of luck to you. Good camping to you all.
In 1931, Lord and Lady Baden Powell set off on another world tour. In New Zealand, they looked at the statue of Scott, the Antarctic explorer. From New Zealand, they went on to Australia to a jamboree in Sydney.
And now I would ask you to listen to your promise and think it over as you've never thought before. You promise, on my honor, your honor, mind you, to do my best, to do my duty to God and to the King, and to obey the Scout law. Will you do your best? Answer me.
Wherever he went, in Australia or elsewhere, he was greeted with tremendous enthusiasm and with an affection that amounted to hero worship. And yet it never had any visible effect on him. The youngest scout or guide could feel at ease in his presence. The Fourth World Jamboree was held in Hungary in 1933, attended by scouts from 48 countries. Baden Powell was on horseback for the parade. This family group was taken on board ship during a tour of Scandinavia later in 1933. In 1934, the chief scout set out again on an extensive world tour, a formidable undertaking for a man of 77.
I'm going to British soil down below there, the other side of the world. And I want to carry your good wishes to your brother scouts over there. So they're just the same as you. When we get there, I shan't be able to tell them from you fellows. They're just as ugly and just as jolly and loyal to their country. So I'm sure you'll be glad if I give a message of good luck to them and goodwill from you all here.
Stockholm in 1935 was the scene of the World Rover Moot, which Baden Powell felt he must attend to encourage these young men of many nations in their efforts to make the Brotherhood of Scouts something more than a mere name. In 1937, Lord Baden Powell returned to India once again for the first All-India Jamboree, an event of great significance because it meant that the Scout ideal of brotherhood had triumphed over differences of race, religion, and caste. The Chief Scout was highly delighted with this demonstration of unity within the Indian movement. At Windsor Castle in April 1937, he was present for the annual St. George's Day service for Scouts. Before the service, the royal family chatted to the Scouts and BP talked to the present Queen. He reached his 80th birthday in 1937. Here is part of a recording he made to mark the occasion.
My dear brother Scouts, I am 80 years old. What do you think of that? But I can't say that I feel very much older than some of you. I want you to have as long and jolly a life as I've had. And you can get it if you keep yourself healthy and helpful to others. You find that by making others happy, you're making yourself all the happier too. I'll tell you my secret. I've always tried to carry out the Scout promise and the Scout law in all that I do. If you do that, you'll make a success of your life and will have a very happy time, even if you live to be 80, like me.
The Fifth World Jamboree in Holland in 1937, attended by Scouts from 31 countries, was the last great occasion of BP's long life. With him is Queen Wilhelmina. Everybody at the Jamboree realized that the sands of his life were running out. His final, "Now goodbye, God bless you all," was charged with a deep affection that was felt throughout the vast assembly. Age was beginning to take its toll, and in the autumn of 1938, he left England for the more congenial climate of Kenya. In Kenya, he spent some time at Treetops, the hut built on top of a tree for observing wild game. Even at this great age, he still occasionally rode a horse. But most of the time, during his last few years, he lived quietly at his new home in Nyeri. Here he is playing with one of his grandchildren. Towards the end, he said, "I am content to leave the great game of scouting in the hands of the young, the keen and the energetic. To them I say, God bless you and prosper your efforts." Lord Robert Baden Powell of Gilwell died peacefully at Nyeri on the 8th of January 1941. He was fittingly escorted by soldiers and scouts on his last journey. His body lies at Nyeri in the shadow of Mount Kenya. BP has gone home, but his spirit lives on in the hearts of the millions of boys and girls of all races who belong to the great movement he founded. Now let's listen to the message he gave on World Scouting in 1934.
Leagues and disarmaments and treaties and promises are all very well in their way between politicians, but they cannot produce peace unless the people themselves really want it. That's what we're after, to try and breed in the next oncoming generation that spirit of friendship, comradeship, and goodwill, which is the true foundation of peace in the world.
That message is as true today as it was when it was first spoken. Let us all remember it and try to live up to the ideals it expresses. For there could be no more fitting memorial than this to Robert Baden Powell, Chief Scout of the world.
I wish you a long and happy life and lots of good camping. Goodbye.